Probably not here.
2023 is what they were thinking for.
And so there's a new table of contents, you can just go down and follow it that way if you want to, or go back to the beginning.
In the winter time, and then of course, the window of sales right now, kind of getting ready for the spring. So it is pretty busy.
Because it's just, you know, with your kind of knowledge, we'll take you, buddy.
Okay.
Too quiet?
To invest.
Harris.
Harris?
I can hear you just fine. How are you guys? Are we good now? All right, well, it's 7 o'clock, and we're going to get going. We want to protect everybody's time tonight. We will try to manage this as best we can. It's a little clunky with the technology, but we will do the best we can. Thanks for coming tonight. This is the March meeting of the Caldwell Urban Renewal Agency. Would the secretary call the roll?
Order. Porter?
Yes.
Ramirez?
Yes.
Aldred?
Yes.
Warwick? Yes. Doty?
Yes.
Cole?
Yes.
Morris?
Here. Great. We finally, for the first time in a long time, at least this year, have a full commission to hear the business tonight. It's wonderful to have both Dave and Steve joining us. We look forward to many years of collaboration together and the experience and expertise that you bring. So thanks for your service. We're also glad that Brad is back. We didn't scare him off after the first meeting, so Brad, welcome again. Are there any special presentations this evening? I'm not aware of any, but just in case something has come up.
I can give one if you want.
Okay, hearing none. Are there any public comments? I cannot happen to see the audience this evening. So is there anybody in the audience that would like to speak on an item not listed on the agenda this evening?
Yes, sir.
All right.
No hands.
Thank you very much, and I appreciate that coaching back there, Julie and, and Brad. Much appreciated. That takes us to the consent calendar.
Mr. Chair.
I trust that you've all had a chance to look it over. Do we have a motion to approve the consent calendar as provided?
Debbie says we need a conflict of interest, and I would trust her.
Okay.
Do we have a conflict of interest? I think you have to ask it. I'm not quite sure.
Okay, thank you. Is there a conflict of interest on any of the items on the agenda this evening?
Nothing, Steve. Nothing. No.
Okay.
Steve.
Thank you. Thank you very much, and thank you, Brad.
It works still.
My gosh.
All right. Well, now we're at the consent calendar. Do we have a motion to approve as presented?
So moved.
Second. Okay, we have a motion by Julie and a second by, I could not tell.
Ramirez.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Ramirez. All in favor, we need a voice vote on this one, I believe. So, Debbie, if you would call the roll.
Warwick? Yes. Aldred?
Yes.
Cole?
Yes.
Moore?
Yes.
Porter?
Yes.
Doty?
Yes.
Ramirez?
Yes.
Very good. Thank you very much. Takes us to our first item of old business. That's the Economic Development Activity Report. And I believe that we have Stephen Jenkins scheduled to come in by Zoom. Is he there?
Mr. Chairman, no.
Steve's not here, Jim.
Okay. All right. We will postpone that activity report. It was in your agenda packet, so we can refer to that if need be, and then contact Stephen if there are any questions regarding his report.
Ophelia is here, though.
Unless Debbie, yes, thank you. Ophelia, you're up next.
Good evening. Thank you, Chairman, Stephen apologizes for not being able to make it today. He is ill at home, and he did try via Zoom, but just couldn't make it tonight, so we wish him all the best, and hopefully he recovers here soon. So I'm gonna go ahead and just add to Stephen's, update. You do have, that in front of you, and I'll add the downtown update. So for downtown, we have Project Yellow, which is a local restaurant business out of Boise seeking to expand in Caldwell. They would bring food offerings in our downtown that we currently do not have. Project White is a retail thriving business out of Boise that is seeking to open a location in downtown Caldwell and actually has found a location. They provided me an update last week. This business is unique in nature as we don't have that type of business currently in downtown. I am meeting with them this week, so that we can arrange a, shout out on our economic development, page. Project Orange is a retail business seeking space in downtown Caldwell, and they have identified space, and hopefully will be opening soon as well. The next project is Project Goat, a health service seeking space in downtown Caldwell, has identified a couple of locations. And then we're also fielding calls from service providers, in terms of offering alternative modes of transportation in our downtown Caldwell. So we're having those, discussions. That is my report for downtown, and I will stand for any questions.
Very good. Thank you, Ophelia. Are there any questions for Ms. Morales?
Well, Ms. Morales, I'm just happy to say, old business was running out of names for things, and you had come up with a whole new catalog of names for things.
Yeah, it was color category this
Yeah,
time.
that's pretty cool.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, Mr. Foltz.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. A couple of questions regarding, Mr. Jenkins's report. There's several citations regarding the, particular sites at North Caldwell. Am I to assume all of those are the new revenue allocation area, as well, or are they in just the northern part of the city?
Give me one moment. Working with, are you referring to working with large national developers with a significant?
Yeah, I'm looking at the first project, Project Hawk, is listed in North Caldwell. The second one is also stated in North Caldwell. Just go down, there's a couple of other projects like it's listed aside in North Caldwell. Again, I'm wondering if all of those are within that new revenue allocation area, or if that's North Ranch.
I might have a different report than you do. I don't see Project Hawk on my list.
Project Hawk?
Yes.
I'm sorry, Hawk. Does that help with an answer? It's the first one on the listing that I see from Mr. Jenkins.
I'm not.
That was me. Those are minutes from the last one.
Sorry.
Yeah, this is the minutes
I'm
from the
sorry.
last meeting.
Okay.
She's looking at,
I'm looking at
so
February.
show here,
My,
so right there, there you go, this is the report you showed.
okay, my apologies.
But there are still,
There are still a
There are
number
still.
that are citing that North Caldwell.
Yeah.
Right.
I'm assuming that's.
yes, on, here on his notes, working with large national developers with a significant, tenant considering the Caldwell market, they're reviewing some large sites in North Caldwell, yes. Yes, we're still getting a lot of interest in that area.
Are there any other questions for Ms. Morales? Okay, I'm not hearing anything, so thank you, Ophelia. Appreciate that very much. Item A, under Part 2, the update report regarding the termination of lease agreements for 510 Arthur. Who's bringing that report this evening?
That will be me, Chairman Ophelia. And
Yes.
so an update on that property. The two tenants have been provided a lease termination. That letter went out a few weeks ago. They were both given until May 31st to vacate the building. We did connect with them. They didn't share any concerns in regards to that date. They were actually happy that we gave them that amount of time. So we are working with them to relocate them. At this time, there's no concerns that they'll find another location. And.
Thank you, Ophelia. Are there any other, questions on that matter for Ophelia? Okay, seeing none, we'll move on to action item number 3. Consider resolution authorizing the acceptance and execution of the purchase and sale agreement, development agreement, and restricted covenant with LPC West, Inc. for approximately 23 acres located at Skyway and Smead Parkway. Mr. Hilty.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good evening, Commissioners. In your package, you had this transaction broken down into 3 different documents. What I'm going to do is give you the kind of the 30,000-foot view of what the transaction looks like based on substantive terms, and then if you have any questions, I'll do my best to answer those. And LPC West has a representative here tonight, Trevor Nickel, here to kind of talk about their plans and their vision for the project, and certainly try to answer questions that you might have as well. The negotiation on this was pretty straightforward. Got a very professional group who's done this before, had a lot of success, hired very competent legal counsel in Boise, so it went smoothly. The push and pull in the negotiation was really limited, I think, to one item. And it had to do, as you'll recall, this originated with an RFP, and Lincoln Property, or LPC West, their local subsidiary, was the successful party on that, and had proposed, I think, a building of 435,000 square feet on this 23 acres, very impressive plan. But the negotiation really focused around whether they were going to build that exact concept plan or something similar, and what flexibility would they have ultimately in the terms to deviate from the concept plan. And so we're going to get into a little bit then what their commitment looks like. I think, one thing that came out of the negotiation, and I was convinced that I was being told the truth, is they do intend to build that conceptual plan. They're excited about it. But that they build for spec. They have contacts across the country. They can come and build these businesses, and that's the reason why they need some flexibility. They need some ability to be reactive to the market and reactive to the needs of some of their users. And so, the truth of the matter is, they are not going to delay construction to find those users, but as they get going here through their due diligence period, if they secure a user who needs something a little bit different, they need some flexibility to respond to that. So I pushed them on that issue. I think we found a reasonable compromise on that. So turning to the documents, the first of the documents is a restrictive covenant that really deals with tax requirements for the property. As you know, we've been, as an agency, monitoring these new developments to make sure that they will be taxable. We don't want to see a large tax-exempt nonprofit, hospital, government building, something like that go in, because we want to see that tax base increase through these developments. So the first document will be recorded. It is a restrictive covenant. Legally, it functions like the restrictive covenants we all wrestle with in our subdivisions. It's a requirement for the occupancy of the property that they pay taxes. And if there is a tax-exempt entity that gets approved and winds up there, then they have to pay funds to the agency in lieu of taxes. Okay, so they may be tax-exempt, but they're still going to have to pay that increment. The second document is the purchase and sale agreement itself. It provides for a purchase price for the 23 acres of $8,175,000, which is certainly the amount that was bid by Lincoln in the RFP response. That is paid in full at closing. There's a 90-day due diligence period. We're comfortable that they're going to move through that pretty quickly. This property was looked at very carefully by McCain. They frankly, during their due diligence period, there were several things they identified and improved. So it's pretty clean, and I don't think they're going to have any trouble getting through their due diligence period. And then finally, closing takes place within 30 days after the due diligence period. So we're looking at basically 4 months at the outside. The last document is, and this is where we've captured sort of the development commitments, is the development agreement. two, upon, execution and closing, will be recorded, so it functions like development agreements that you may be familiar with from the planning and zoning side. And again, at a high level, it identifies allowed uses, and so the property is zoned, M1, I believe. But I went specifically through that, the land use table for M1 uses. There were some things in there that weren't quite consistent with the representations for the industrial type development that was pitched in the RFP, and so we took those out. We got zero pushback from Lincoln on them. So the allowed uses were specifically reviewed to make sure that what they build is consistent with the representations that they made. All right, development commitment. It's broken out into two phases. The first phase will contain a building of at least 210,000 square feet. They will commence construction within 10 months of the effective date. So again, we're looking at maybe 4 months will be due diligence and closing. Then they've, of course, got to work out their financing and get building permits approved. So 10 months from basically now, they'll be under construction on phase one. They have a right to deviate on the size of that by up to 10% without agency approval. Any deviation beyond that would require agency approval. Phase two is basically the same thing. A second phase of 210,000 square feet that will commence within 18 months after the effective date. Okay, so we're going to get going on lots of construction right away. Again, 10% deviation. So it's that 210,000 square feet of industrial use consistent with their RFP proposal in each phase, and there is this margin where they would get to play with that, and they can increase it however they want to, right? If they decrease it, it can only be decreased by 10% without coming back for approval of that from the agency. So that's kind of where we landed. It's not entirely consistent with their RFP, but trust me, it's not what they originally proposed either. We reached kind of the middle point through the negotiation. I let Trevor know that that might be something you want to talk about, so he's here to kind of tell you what their plans are. I have the advantage of having worked with their team, including folks in Los Angeles and Seattle. I was convinced in their integrity. I was convinced in their sincerity. They want to maximize their return on investment here as well. They want to build out this site. They want to see impressive users come and locate their businesses here and create jobs and do all the same things that we're interested in. So I mean, I really get the sense that our interests are aligned. They were just able to convince me that they need to be a little bit flexible and responsive to the market, which ultimately makes sense to me. So that's why you see what you see. Any questions for me?
Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Hilty.
Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Hilty.
I was just going to ask.
There is a question, Mr. Chair.
Thank you.
There's the question.
Thank you.
Initially, that property is about 20 acres, and then you referenced 23, so there was another piece of property that was just south of that was not an ownership of the urban renewal agency. Did the agency purchase that, and then that was packaged, or was that a separate piece?
Yeah, the
First question was
agency purchased, there was actually 2 1/2-acre lots that make up the 3 acres just immediately south, and on the east side, yes, the agency purchased that back from McCain, and so now owns it and is in position to sell it.
And I would assume that any of the other incentives that were tied to the McCain project are not tied to this particular project?
No, it was renegotiated completely independently. I'm trying to remember what other incentives we had for McCain, I'm not sure.
Job creation grants.
There may have been, or that wouldn't apply to this one, since it's kind of spec arrangement, so.
Thank you.
So just following up on Mr. Pohl's question, is there a separate development agreement for the 3 acres or what, that bulk, because I'm sure, completely different size?
It's all contiguous, and all 23 acres are referred to as the site.
Okay.
So on that 23 acres, you'll see phase one and phase two. Okay. And exactly where they position their buildings and access and so forth is not specifically controlled. Well, I should, certainly as controlled by certain provisions of city code, but it's not controlled by the developer. Okay.
Any other questions for Mr. Hilty?
All right, well, if I may, Mr. Chairman, I'll have,
Thank you.
Mr. Nickel come up and address the commission and answer any questions.
Thank you.
Good evening. Chairman, Mr. Hilty, appreciate it. Thank you for that. I mean, really, he covered everything on it. I'm not sure what more I can really add to it, except that, how excited we are to be part of this project and how much we look forward to getting this under construction. Appreciate Mr. Hilty in really the negotiations of this. As he mentioned, our goal is really, in our minds, aligned with what the city wants as far as job creation and creating a large-scale industrial project, right? And to his point, we did ask for a little bit of flexibility, and really I actually spoke with a group today who's looking for a good-sized operations in Caldwell that would require a build-to-suit cold storage type facility that it would alter things a little bit on the site, right? So that's kind of why we were asking for some of that flexibility. But our whole intent and purpose is to get construction going as quickly as possible and complete construction as quickly as we can. We asked for the phasing, again, for that reason. If we are working with a specific group, we can get going on phase 1 while we're working negotiations with another group on the phase 2 and be able to accommodate them on, especially if they're wanting a different design than what we have for the site, allows a little bit of flexibility for that design. And then also gives us the option if it is substantially smaller for some reason, if they require some sort of, special use, it does allow us to come back and get specific and special approval from you. With that being said, again, thank you. Appreciate the allowing us to be part of this project and really open it up for you for questions if you have any.
Maybe one or two real quick. Are you looking at 2 access points, one off the Speed and one off the Skyway?
That's correct, yes. If we could have another one, that'd be great, but yeah, we're looking at those 2 access points. Yeah.
Any other questions for Mr. Nickel? Okay, I'm not seeing any. We need to take some action on this resolution this evening. Debbie, if you can hear me? Yes. I neglected to bring copies of the resolution with me. Could we have somebody there read that resolution, and then we can move forward with it? And this will apply to the next resolution as well.
Chairman, I'll read the resolution by title only into the record. A resolution of the Caldwell Urban Renewal Agency authorizing the execution of a purchase and sell agreement, development agreement, and restricted covenant with LTC West, Inc., for approximately 23 acres located at Skyway and Smead Parkway.
Thank you, Debbie. Do we have a motion to authorize this resolution?
So moved.
Okay, we have a motion by Ms. Warwick. Do we have a second?
Second?
Second by Mr. Allgood. Debbie, would you read the roll, please?
Warwick? Yes. Allgood?
Yes.
Foltz?
Yes.
Moore?
Yes.
Porter?
Yes.
Doty?
Yes.
Ramirez?
Yes.
Very good. Thank you. Good luck, Mr. Nickel. We can't wait to see something happen there. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Brings us to item number 4. Similar action, consider resolution authorizing the acceptance and execution of the disposition and development agreement with Aztec Development, Inc. for property located at Arthur and Kimball in downtown Caldwell. Mr. Hilty.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is the property, just to orient you all, that is sort of behind the stage across from the plaza. We refer to it as the Kimball and Arthur property. It's currently a vacant lot. There's divided ownership there. The agency owns the southerly half or 2/3. I'm not sure exactly how it's divided up. And that is the portion of this that we're talking about. So, there is the portion that's northerly is under separate ownership and not covered by this particular agreement. Aztec Development was the successful responder on the RFP for development at this site. Its representative, Ken Sanga, is here tonight, so I'll probably proceed just like I did with Lincoln Property Group. I'll give you a high-level view of the substantive terms of this DDA, and then, have Mr. Sanga come up and introduce himself, talk about his plans, and, answer questions if he can. This, for some of you that have been on the agency for a while, this document is familiar to you. It's consistent with, or very similar to, the DDAs we've negotiated for the theater project. We've negotiated for the Creekside project. And, this one follows in that, even though it's a little bit smaller project in scope, it follows, the same basic format. Section 2.5 on page 7 describes the project. And this agreement's pretty straightforward. It lifts the project description basically out of the RFP response. And when we get to the attachment on the design development plan, you'll see that basically those pages were drawn from the conceptual drawings, in the RFP response. It is a mixed-use development, including restaurant, patio space, and again, basically the same as was proposed in the RFP. Now, in negotiating with Mr. Sanga and his attorney, in the last couple weeks, his plans may be somewhat in flux. And I said, well, you need to commit to something. And he said, well, what I'm thinking about doing is adding another story higher. I'm thinking about expanding the footprint if there's adjoining property that can be reasonably acquired nearby. And I said, Ken, if what you're talking about is expanding what you propose to do in the RFP, you're probably going to be fine. I don't think those kinds of changes are going to be denied by the agency. So what we ultimately worked out to get this moving and to get it going was to have him commit to construct what he proposed to construct in the RFP. If he wants significant changes, he'll have to come back. My understanding of his plans at this point is that those changes would be to expand the size and scope of this project. That's a good thing. That increases the tax base. It increases the investment in downtown, opens up more and additional uses and amenities to folks. So if you got specific questions about what he wants to do, you can ask him. I do think that those plans are in process, but everything he talked about with me that might differ from the RFP proposal was an expansion of the project. All right. Section 5.1 on page 12 is the purchase price. As you're aware, and as was part of the request for proposals, the purchase price will be based on the reuse appraised value of the property. And again, that's a process where you work backwards towards the purchase price. The appraiser looks at the finished product and assumes a reasonable rate of return on that investment, and then works backwards towards the purchase price. If you're going to invest this much money and you want a reasonable return, what can you afford to pay for the dirt? That's how a reuse appraisal works. That is yet to be done in this, and that'll be the next step, is having him finalize his plans. He's aware of that, and then we'll move towards that reuse appraisal to establish the purchase price. Consistent with other reuse appraisals downtown, high likelihood that that purchase price comes back negative. If that occurs, then the purchase price is zero. So the property may be able to be acquired for zero, but we're not going to pay anybody to take it. And I've had that discussion with Mr. Sanga and his attorney. Section 6.1, when the property closes, it will be acquired as is. There is, of course, a due diligence period in the meantime. And then drawing your attention to attachment 3, you'll see the basic concept design. Again, this was taken right out of the RFP response. And so, to be clear, this is the minimum construction that would be required, something that is substantially in conformance with this. As the plans move from the conceptual stage toward more design detail and then ultimately construction plans under Section 7 of the DDA, those documents, whether they are changes or not changes, will come before the agency, and you'll be able to see the level of detail that's been added to the project. Attachment 2 is the project schedule. He plans to be under construction, he wants to do a two-phase, construction, which is consistent with what we just heard. Phase 1 would be the first floor, he wants to be under construction, by the end of October of this year. Phase 2 would be the balance of the project, and that would, commence within 6 months following completion of Phase 1. So, if you think about a multi-story building, you're gonna get the ground floor in Phase 1, the rest of it to follow within 6 months, gotta follow at some level anyway. And so, it's a fairly aggressive schedule, but he wants to get his project, going and built and, completed, within 36 months after Phase 1, basically. So, we'd be looking at potentially 4 years, probably less, if it's diligently pursued to completion. But there are some challenges building vertically in that location that might take some more time. So, that concludes my overview of the disposition development agreement, and I'd stand for any questions you have.
Any questions for Mr. Hilty? Very good. Would, Mr. Sangha like to come and address the, commission?
Good evening.
Welcome, sir.
I never took those public speaking courses in college, so I struggle with that. As Mr. Hilty said, the project stays pretty much very similar to what our RFP was. It's a pretty tight spot. There's only so much creativity we can create out of this. So it's gonna be your first floor bar and restaurant, hopefully, and then a residential component to it on the rest of the floors. And so far, we only foresee, if any changes, will be expansion of the project horizontally and vertically. Nothing.
Thank you. Any, questions?
Mr. Chair, I have a question. Couple of them, actually. Are you gonna operate anything here, or are you just gonna be the landlord for tenants that operate stuff here?
I'm not smart enough to operate that restaurant.
So you're just the building?
Well, depending on the rest of the components, we may operate, the residential component of it, but the ground floor will be, different operator.
And will there be any on-site parking, or will it be for your land tenants?
It's 5,000 square feet, clearly there's, I don't know how we'll provide any on-site parking.
All right. I had another one, but I can't remember it. I'll think of it if anybody else has a question.
Mr. Chairman, couple of questions.
Yes, sir.
Did you, have a chance to talk to Mr. Bauman next door on their lot? And,
I have.
Okay, I'm just curious what their thoughts, reactions might have been.
Their thoughts are very expensive, but we're working on it.
So it might actually be part of the overall.
We're trying very hard, yeah.
And then you mentioned residential, is this gonna be apartment living, or,
Okay.
non-occupied kind of?
Apartments, that's what we're thinking, more like, studio efficiency kind of style. So it'll be more conducive to, younger population wanting to live downtown, music playing across the street and, that kind of lifestyle. So, that's the goal.
Another quick question, there's an alleyway just beyond that, and I know in some earlier proposals, there was an idea about vacating a portion of that for resident parking. Was that, and again, I apologize, I was not privy to, some of the RFP, is that something that's being thought out or considered?
Yeah, we asked Mr. Hilty, he dug his heels on that. He's been amazing to work with. One of the, possibilities are, if we are able to make a deal with the neighbors, to discussed the possibility of underground parking with ingress and egress from the alley. And, the conceptual, plan that I've discussed with the engineers, suggest that, we may be able to add up to 24, parking spots, by doing that. But, in order for that to happen, the next door, neighbor's, lot has to be acquired, otherwise there's just not enough space to create enough grade for the cars to go underneath and all that.
Mr. Chair? See him shaking his head, that must mean go ahead. I have a question, I know this is in phases, and I apologize because I didn't read through each phases. So will there be sections built and then open for occupancy, and then the next phase, construction will continue?
I don't think we have enough, time in between, the two phases for the first phase to be occupied before the second phase, and I don't know how conducive it will be for, the ground floor, occupant to be. We're hoping a pretty busy restaurant will come in there, and, while the construction's going on, I think, the idea is that, we finish the whole thing unless somebody becomes super aggressive and they really wanna jump in, while we're doing the construction. One of the ideas that we're looking into is maybe, go to the prefab market for the top floors and see if we can, bring them in and, stack them really quickly, but, still in the conceptual, phase. So if that happens, then it may be the possibility that, there's not much, disturbance. But if we're gonna go with old school construction, then, I don't think it will be conducive to open the commercial business.
The conversation, the parking is what made me think of that, because if there is a business there and there are construction implements all around, it makes it even more difficult to get parked.
Yeah, it won't work, yeah, you're right.
Thank you.
Maybe one.
Mr. Senga, I have a question.
Yes, sir.
And that would be, have you set a date as to when either negotiations conclude with, Mr. Baumann, or, at what point are you gonna stop pursuing that property if there's still resistance?
The ball is in their court, Mr. Chairman, at this point, so, we agreed, on the price, on their price, and, there was, talk of a substantial amount of non-refundable earnest money deposits that made me a little bit uneasy, and, so that's where the holdup is. Other than that, we agreed on the price, everything else, due diligence and all that stuff, and they, wanted substantial amount of that purchase price go hard even before the due diligence is started, and that kind of made us a little bit uneasy.
Mr. Chairman, maybe one last question.
Mr. Fox?
Is
Yes.
this project contingent on having that property?
No. It will make it, much more, practical to do it, but, it's not contingent.
Mr. Chairman, I have a question.
Yes.
I have a testimonial. So I lived down there from 91 to 94, and, gosh, I think it was $250 a month rent back then. The only thing I couldn't get used to was the train and the parking. And Caldwell was quite vacant back then, so you could kind of park anywhere in those streets, but, I think it'd be kind of a nice place to live there now with the plaza and everything, so good luck.
Thank you. We think so too. We're excited about it. Hopefully, we're able to make a deal with the neighbors and, take up the, otherwise, the little lot next door doesn't make any sense for, you can only do, we're not in New York to go vertical on those tiny.
Yeah.
So, the hope is that something will come out of it, but, I don't control that, so, sellers will have to kind of figure that out.
Yeah. yeah, that sat vacant for quite a while and, it burned down. And, all my stuff burned down with it. Thank God I had renter's insurance. But there was a restaurant and a finance company and a pawn shop on the corner and the apartments upstairs, so it was pretty neat, yeah.
Thank you. Any other questions for Mr. Sanga? Mr. Sanga, thank you very much.
Thank you, gentlemen, ladies.
Thank you. Okay, so we are here to consider a resolution, and I happen to have a copy of this one, Debbie, so I will go ahead and read it by its title. It's a resolution of the Caldwell Urban Renewal Agency authorizing the execution of a development and disposition agreement with Aztec Development, Inc., and Idaho Corporation for the site located at Kimball and Arthur in downtown Caldwell. Do we have a motion in support of passage of the resolution?
Mr. Chairman, excuse me.
Nice try.
Before we get too much further, I'd like to ask Mr. Hilty a question.
Yes, sir.
In the RFP, did we address parking at all, or any requirements for parking? The 2 levels of apartments and no parking bothers me.
I'm going off memory here, but I think there was a general criteria about dealing with parking in an urban environment. I don't remember how that was evaluated by the committee when the recommendation came forward, but it was certainly mentioned in there.
Considering the parking that we have now, based on our success, to think of, I don't know how many apartments you would fit on that in 2 levels, say 8, whatever. And there's no dedicated parking anywhere near that, so I'm concerned with that. Mr. Chair, if you'd allow some discussion on that, I guess.
Yes.
So I was just curious if the RFP addressed that in any fashion that you remember.
No, just not beyond what I've just told you. That there was, some kind of narrative about that, but I don't remember the details, and I don't have the document.
Mr. Chair, speaking of urban parking, they do have that parking lot right next to the bookstore that's paid parking. That is the true definition of urban parking right there. You buy your parking place if you want to live downtown.
Yeah. In the bookstore,
That's not their parking lot. That's paid, that's owned by someone else and it's paid parking.
oh, really?
By the month.
Yeah.
It's quite affordable too.
Yeah, I wasn't aware that they were doing that, but
Yeah.
interesting.
So there is parking there, but you'd have to pay for it.
Right, well, that's not unusual for
Right,
downtown.
it's for urban parking, yeah.
Right. Okay. All right, thank you, Julie.
Are there any other concerns that we can address with Mr. Hilty before he takes a chair? Okay, thank you, Mark. Okay, I will read the resolution again, just to refresh our memory here. It's as short as mine. I need to read it again. A resolution of the Caldwell Urban Renewal Agency authorizing the execution of a development and disposition agreement with Aztec Development, Inc., and Idaho Corporation for the site located at Kimball and Arthur in downtown Caldwell. Do we have a motion for its approval?
So moved.
Okay, we have a motion by Ms. Warwick. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Ramirez. Debbie, would you call the roll, please?
Yes. Warwick,
Yes.
Ramirez,
Yes.
Aldred,
Yes.
Volk,
Yes.
Moore,
Yes.
Porter,
Yes.
Jody.
Yes.
Okay, very good. Mr. Sanga, thank you so much for being here tonight, and we wish you well. Thank you. Okay, that takes us to action item number 1 in new business, presentation by the URA Treasurer, Ms. Mitchell, of the year 2021 Caldwell East Urban Renewal Agency audit, and we are to consider its acceptance. Ms. Mitchell.
Thank you, Chair. Commissioners, tonight you have before you the fiscal year 2021 audit report,
and, request for your acceptance. So I'll just go over a couple things, tonight with you. So, on page 3 of this audit report, under financial highlights, I'll go over bullet point number 2. As of September 30th, 2021, the agency's general fund reported ending fund balance of $13,494,791. Of this amount, $9,499,000 is restricted for urban renewal projects. $3,973 is in a non-spendable form of long-term notes receivable, and $3,991,818 is restricted for our bond covenant. Currently, the agency's debt obligation at the end of fiscal year 21, $5,959,506. Of that debt, we will have 3 bonds that will pay off this year. So, bonds 2012, 2016, and 2018 will pay off on September 1st of 2022. Page 10 of the audit report identifies your assets, liabilities, and your fund balance. Under your assets, you have $11,039,519 in cash and investments. You have taxes receivable of $11,383,936. Your restricted cash and cash equivalents, these are for our bonds, $3,991,818. That gives you a total of $26,419,807 in assets. Liabilities, you have vouchers payable of $451,279. You have a payable due to other government of $1,120,517. For total liabilities of $1,571,796. Deferred inflows of resources, this is the upcoming property tax assessment, $11,353,220. And then here's your fund balance. The amount is, total fund balance is $13,494,791. Next page, on page 11, these are our expenditures and our revenues. You had a total of $14,350,286 in expenditures. Total revenues came in, most of it is from your property taxes of $10,280,094. When you net the expenditures against the revenues, we have a use of fund balance of $4,070,192. Then we had a sale of property, so $712,869, net that against our deficit. We have a total reduction to your fund balance of $3,357,323. Leaving you a net position at the end of the year of $13,494,791. And with that, we'll go to page 24. And on page 24, this highlights the bonds and the debt that we have for this year. So you'll see there at the top of the page, in this year, 2022, we have bond payments, principal payments of $4,463,792. And then we have a final bond payment in 2023. And with that, I will stand for questions.
Very good. Thank you, Ms. Mitchell. Any questions for Carol?
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
Carol, I have a question.
Sure.
As you know, I come from a police background, and when we do financial audits, or when I did financial audits in my detective, capacity, it was always because we were looking for, red flags, discrepancies, anything like that. What is the purpose of doing this audit, other than, and I apologize, a lot of the numbers you're giving us are a lot of the same numbers you give us when you give us a financial report. So what was the purpose of doing this audit other than by statute?
Other than by statute, the purpose of this audit is for us to provide you the information, the financial statements, as well as the auditors, who presented back in, February to council when they presented the audit report. They identified that there were no findings, no, misrepresentations of internal controls. So they're also auditing our internal controls as well as our representations and making sure that we're classifying revenues and expenditures properly.
And we had no red flags, no check marks of anything that we need to
No.
take care of?
Yeah, there is a report at the back from the auditors, that identify that this was a clean audit and there is no, misstatements or it's not it's an unmodified opinion.
That's pretty impressive, because many of the audits that we've done, we always find something, so that's very impressive, and I assume that has a lot to do with how you take care of business, so thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Ms. Mitchell? Okay, very good, thank you, Carol.
All right, and with that, Chairman, I would stand for acceptance of the audit report.
Thank you. Do we have a motion for acceptance?
Mr. Chair,
Yes,
I move that we accept this, audit as presented.
very good, thank you. Motion by Mr. Ramirez, do we have a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Allgood. Debbie, would you call the roll, please?
Ramirez,
Yes.
Warwick,
Yes.
Doty,
Yes.
Moore,
Yes.
Bull,
Yes.
Allgood,
Yes.
Porter.
Yes.
Thank you.
Very good, thank you. And Carol, are you handling the next one as well, this public hearing regarding the annual activities report?
Yes, I am, Chairman. So, Chairman, Commissioners, you have before you tonight our annual activities report. So this is kind of basically the same thing that I just went over, but by state code, we're required to provide a calendar year report to you. So it's for calendar year 2021. By code, we are also required to have a public hearing on this activities report. This report was presented to council in February, and council has accepted the report and has now moved for us to have a public hearing. So at this time, the public hearing is open. Ms. Geyer has reported, Chairman, that there are nobody signed up to testify in favor or in neutral or in opposition of the activities report. So at this time, I will take a motion to close testimony. So moved.
Do we have a motion to close the testimony? Thank you, Ms. Warwick. Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a second by an unnamed voice. I'm sorry, I can't see you. All in favor, signify with an aye. Thank you, Mr. Foltz.
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed with nay? Very good. Public hearing is closed. And that brings us to the resolution, I believe.
Yes.
And Debbie, I do not have a copy of this resolution.
Mr. Chair, I'll read the resolution by title only. Resolution accepting the annual activities report for calendar year 2021 of the Caldwell Urban Renewal Agency.
Thank you, Debbie. Do we have a motion to approve the resolution?
So moved.
Thank you, Ms. Warwick. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Ramirez. Debbie, would you call the roll?
Warwick,
Yes.
Doty,
Yes.
Bull,
Yes.
Moore,
Yes.
Allgood,
Yes.
Ramirez,
Yes.
Porter.
Yes. Thank you, everybody. This takes us to action item number 4, and I think we're right back to Ms. Mitchell, considering the invoices for payment from, the URA treasurer.
Thank you, Chairman and Commissioners, you have before you tonight a request to approve $55,580.29 in expenses, broken out in the following amounts. We have our monthly economic development support of $18,000, our, monthly, attorney services of $6,500, Canyon County's, project for the Fair Expo at $10,000, our, second half of our payment for ICRIM of $10,645. We have the BID on 516 Main Street for $935.29, and then our annual trustee, fees for Zion's at $9,500. With that, I'll stand for questions.
Thank you. Any questions for Ms. Mitchell? Okay, do we have a motion to approve these invoices for payment?
So moved.
We have a motion by Ms. Warwick. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Allgood. Everyone in favor, signify with an aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay? Very good, thank you. And action item number 5, invoices for ratification from the treasurer. Ms. Mitchell.
Thank you, Chairman. Commissioners, you have before you tonight the request to ratify, the purchase. This is for the property at 510 Arthur Street. This is, for $1,462,691.92.
Very good. Do we have a motion for? Very good. Any questions for Ms. Mitchell on this, matter? If not, do we have a motion for ratification?
So moved.
Motion by Mr. Allgood. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second by, is that Mr. Ramirez?
It would be.
Okay, thank you. All those in favor, signify with an aye.
Aye.
Any opposed with nay? Very good, motion passes. Treasurer's report.
Thank you, Chairman. Commissioners, you have before you tonight the treasurer's report. For those of you that are new, for Commissioner Moore and Commissioner Foltz, I start in the yellow box. I don't know if it's yellow on your screen, but it's yellow on my piece of paper. And then we just kind of go through that box. So start at the very bottom. We have a total of $12,357,594.65. That was broken out into 3 accounts. We have the LGIP account, that is an investment account with the State Controller's Office of $116,676.70. We have the Banner Bank CD of $250,380.49. And then we have our operating account with Banner Bank of $11,990,537.46. Within that Banner Bank operating account, we have the following categories. We have restricted for other taxing districts, that's $10,934,533.89. Our projects for the city, we have negative $55,745.35. Just a reminder that this is not a negative in the account, this is just how we track it so that we segregate between other taxing districts projects and city projects. We are waiting for a tax payment to come in for that. We have restricted for the urban renewal, this is the TBCC rental income from prior years, $731,088.69. And then what we refer to as urban renewal job creation, $340,660.23. And with that, I'll stand for questions.
Any questions for Ms. Mitchell? Very good. Thank you, Carol.
Thank you.
Do we have a motion to approve these invoices as presented, or this cash reconciliation report as presented? Thank you.
So moved.
We have a motion by Mr. Allgood. Do we have a second?
Second.
And a second by Ms. Warwick. All those in favor, please signify with an aye.
Aye.
Any opposed with a nay? Very good, thank you. And now to a review of the calendar dates for the budget meetings.
Yes, can you believe it? I just gave you the audit report, and now we're talking budget. There was no break, we just slid right into this. So, your fiscal year 2023 proposed calendar is on July 11th, Monday, July 11th, at 6 p.m. We will have a workshop to go over the budget. And then, that same night on Monday, July 11th, in our regularly scheduled meeting, I will call for a public hearing, for the public hearing to be set, for your August meeting. So then on your August meeting on August 8th, we will have the public hearing for acceptance of that budget. Any questions on that process?
I have a question, Ms. Mitchell.
Yes.
As we go forward in our budgeting, will these restricted other tax districts, will that ever change, or that's always gonna be restricted?
It will go away, because as we move into the second revenue allocation area, we won't be breaking it up like that. It's just a tracking purpose that was established internally so that we could track what other taxing districts had requested for projects. So for example, Canyon County, their increment money has been used, in the past, it was used to build the administration building, and that's one of our bond payments that we make for that administration building. And then currently, right now, they're using the rest of their increment funding to, do the infrastructure for that new expo building. So we're tracking those by project.
Okay, and so that money will be accounted for at the end. If someone doesn't have a project, will it free that money up?
Yes, yes. And that will be the plan going into this final budget year in 2023, is that other taxing districts' increment revenue will then be, it'll just all be one amount for projects.
That's what I was after, thank you.
I know it's very confusing to separate it out.
It took me forever to figure it out.
It's a lot of work.
Any other questions regarding the calendar dates? Okay, thank you, Carol.
Thank you.
Much appreciated.
Thank you. Mr. Chair, if I may, I have one more item, I'd like to review with the, commission and you. When we just did the bank reconciliation report, and, Commissioner Allgood is always asking about that, LGIP account because it's so small, and why are we tracking it, and we're only making $13 and some odd cents on that every month. One of the things I'm going to do is move those funds out of that investment account, that $116,676, because that investment amount is tied to this current allocation area that's getting ready to sunset. And so that's an asset that we need to move and use that funding so that we can complete these projects. So with that, I will move it out of this LGIP account. And then what I would like to do is move the restricted revenue for the TVCC rental income, because that rental income is one of the items that we can keep when this current allocation area gets ready to close, because that was earned revenue, so it's not tied to any increment property tax. Since we won't be using that money until, looking ahead in the budget, I'm looking at 2024, fiscal year 2024, we would start paying our admin expenses, the immediate expenses that we have to pay. So it would be our ICRIMP insurance, our legal fees, our audit. Those are the required expenses that we have to have. So I would then, in future year 2024, use that funding then to start paying those bills from until we start getting increment revenue coming off of that second allocation area.
And just so we're clear, I know the answer, there's just no money from this, renewal area.
This area currently right now, yes?
Will carry over.
No,
None of it will be closed, there'll be no money to transfer to the new area.
correct. I can't do that. And I got a couple police officers that I do not want to walk out here with handcuffs or in orange.
Thank you.
Okay, so, thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Chris.
If I could,
Thank you,
one
Carol.
other question real quick, Mr. Chair.
Yes.
On the TDCC restricted, you kind of mentioned that that's something in essence that will be carried over.
Yes.
And I know, going way back, part of the idea and vision of that was to continue support of economic development efforts. Is that still part of the vision?
It can be. It will depend on what city council chooses to do. Right now, when we go from, one more year, economic development will be funded at the $216,000 in fiscal year 2023. And then in fiscal year 2024, it will be up to council and this body here to define how much we're going to support, the economic development department out of the new allocation area. It's also gonna depend on what that increment money looks like, that first year. So it could be used out of this $731,000 to support them, but it will be gone real fast.
Thank you.
My conservative nature is to say, no, because I would like to use this to pay bills, the mandated bills, for the next 2 years, until we can build that, increment up out of the second allocation area.
Any final questions for Carol?
I have a question.
Yes.
What, again, just so I know, what are the mandated fees again?
We have to have an annual audit, regardless of the fact whether we have a big, small, or just the agency is in existence. That's required.
Right.
We have to carry insurance, so that's ICRAM. And then we have to have our legal fees, so.
Thank you.
Very good. Thank you, Ms. Mitchell. With that, we'll go to our attorney report. Mr. Hilke, there are 3 items there for us, so we'll let you take it away.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We made significant progress on the DDA for 516 Main, which is the Biscuit and Hogs, the Godsill development. Didn't quite have it in place for this meeting, like we were able to get to the finish line. I have been corresponding with their attorney, asked for them to come tonight to give you an update. Apparently, Boomer was exposed to COVID over the weekend and was reticent to do that. Nonetheless, they are looking, the design, their specific design has progressed, I think, quite a bit farther than what we saw just with Aztec development a little bit ago. And they're going to be coming forward with quite a bit more detail, but some of those decisions haven't quite been made. They're also bidding certain components of it. The contractor is on board. So I think that even though we don't have a DDA to approve tonight, I think the project's a little bit farther along. So I'm confident that next month we'll have a DDA to approve for the 516 Main site. Probably not for 215 and 217 Kimball, that's the Olive and Vine, that DDA is in process still. And probably have them come and give an update next time. That one's been, I don't know if delayed is the right word, paused a little bit because that, just like the one we heard about Aztec, there was the potential for an adjoining property to be acquired and folded into that development somehow. And we're trying to run that to ground. Probably that would be better for site development if we can make that happen. But, you know, we've got to work through that wrinkle. So that's caused a little bit of a pause on the 215 and 217 South Kimball site. That brings us to Creekside. Creekside is continuing to get down to brass tacks. There is a parking agreement that has been largely negotiated and will be before the city council a week from tonight to set aside some off-street parking through a permit process, shared parking sites for some of the residential users there. That's been something that's been in the works with that development for quite some time. The agency committed to try to push that forward. So now we've got a proposal for 135 sites in the vicinity of the Creekside development. And that would be shared parking. And the concept at this point is that it would be shared with, all those sites are off-street, and it would be shared with business owners and downtown employees. It's been a problem we've had lots of problems with parking. Part of the problem has been business owners and employees taking up on-street parking sites, you know, in the vicinity of where lots of shoppers need to come and go. So we're trying to figure out how to align a couple of interests here. Parking for the Creekside development with, some designated parking, again, not reserved space, it's a permit process. With some of the other folks, frankly, we'd like to incentivize to move to other locations. Anyway, that parking agreement will be before the city council, because the city council is the one that will have to enter into the lease on it, or at least enter into the agreement. So the conceptual part of it, the letter of intent, will be before the city council next week. There's also a no-build easement, across the, Rob, could you pull up the site for Creekside? I think that's the site we've been looking at for a no-build easement. The city owns property right across the street from the Creekside development. It's a little triangular piece along the creek that is really, it's part of the creek, park, linear park. From very early on, I think Creekside Development recognized that they needed no-build easement there, and there's really two reasons for that. One is that, they don't wanna orient their buildings, phases 1 and phase 2, to take in the view of the creek and make them aesthetic for people walking along the creek, just to have a building built right between them and the creek. And so that's part of it. It's that triangular green piece right there that Rob's highlighting. So the other reason why is because of the orientation they're building adjacent to the lot line, they would have some fire code issues if anything was built across the street, it's across the path. And so it protects their fire code compliance to make sure that there's no building that's gonna be there. Now, in dealing with this from the city side, it's always been the intent that that be a park. There's little likelihood that it would ever be sufficient for anything to be built on anyway. So what we have agreed to, and again, this will be for the city council, not the agency to approve because it is owned by the city, is that could be developed for a park. So park amenities, playground equipment, picnic tables, landscaping, the types of things that would logically be there, can be there. And then no building over 12 feet high. Yeah. So I think those two things will be before the city council. Those are conditions to closing. We're also working on, eliminating an easement. There's a reimbursement agreement, which was part of the original incentive for this particular development. There's a lot consolidation underway. So a lot of moving parts with this as we get right down to the wire. The target for closing on this is, April 1. So before the next agency meeting. Chandler Austin is here from the Chase Mixon tonight, to answer questions that you may have. We may need a special agency meeting, Mr. Chairman, sometime before the end of the month. There are a couple little loose ends that we probably need to tie up with a DDA amendment. Nothing that we haven't been discussing, nothing new, nothing significant, nothing that changes the size and scope of the project or anything like that. But probably worth it to keep the time frame alive for the closing, and then the dirt will start flying shortly after that. So that's the updates that I have. After you are done with me with questions, I'll have Chandler come up and he can address you and answer questions you have as well.
Very good. Any questions for Mr. Hilty?
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
Mark, as part of this parking plan that's being worked on, are there dedicated stalls for hotel guests?
No. Well, there's not. They have 60-some sites on the project, right? They have a parking lot on the first floor of the project. They can do whatever they want with those.
Okay,
So there would not be dedicated sites.
I wasn't aware that they'd have that many parking stalls on site.
Yeah, and I don't think they plan to use that for the hotel, but what hotel parking is going to be in designated lots, off-street with the permit, that's covered in the 135 permit.
Okay, that's what I got there, thank you.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you, Mark.
Thank you.
And Mr. Austin, if you'd like to come and address the commission?
Mark always does a good job of hitting everything that we need to
but no, thanks for, having me again tonight, and, it's crunch time in 2 weeks, almost 2 weeks, a little over 2 weeks, so, we're all hands on deck and just trying to get those final items that hopefully I mentioned tied out. But we're not gonna answer any questions if you guys have them.
So,
Any questions for Chandler?
yeah, Mr. Chair, this is Chris again. So are you guys happy with the way the parking's progressing? Is it fitting the model that you guys have in mind?
We're gonna get there, yeah. It was our financing partners was the big pull, and so I think the way that we have set it up, it's not the perfect way that we wanted it, but I think it gets us to where we need to be to get all our financial partners comfortable.
Okay.
And if I had to say anything, it was just the exclusive rights is what we're really going for. But I think if we're able to balance how many parking stalls there is with the number of permits, I think that would be pretty darn close to exclusive rights. So I think we're gonna be all right. And the end goal was to be able to, if I was gonna be living in the apartment, I would want to be able to come home at night and know that there's a parking stall waiting for me, rather than to drive around the block 3-4 times for a parking spot to open up. So I think the way that we've structured, our residents and our tenants are gonna be able to find a place to park at night.
Any other questions?
And Chairman, too, I sent you that email this, last couple of days, and so if there's any questions, don't hesitate to holler. And, the goal of that was to get the ball rolling so that lot consolidation can be ready, for closing on April 1.
Yes, I got that, and I, asked for a little help from, some of the other city staff on that, so you'll be finding an answer here right away.
Awesome, thank you. Thanks, everyone.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Well, that's nearly to the end of our agenda. Do we have any commissioner reports this evening? All right, well, I will just, bring this meeting to a close. Thank you so much for allowing us to, hold this meeting in this format. It's very uncomfortable to do it this way. I apologize for not being there, but I sure thank you for your service, and thank you for the, honor that I have to, act as your vice chairman these days. So with that, do we have a motion for adjournment?
So moved.
All right, you two. I will give the, I'm gonna break the tie. Motion by Ms. Warwick and second by Mr. Allgood. All those in favor signify with an aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Good night, everybody. Thank you so much.